The Atlantic salmon that lived in this collapsed fish farm are considered an invasive species now that many of them are loose. Today, Cook Aquaculture has 2 vessels with cranes on board to try and stabilize the nets and begin recovering how many fish are left inside of them. The company is no longer citing last Monday's eclipse 2 days after the pens collapsed as a potential contributor, but it's still citing what it calls excessively high tides and currents. Oceanographers quickly debunked the eclipse idea and say the spring tides of last weekend, while still in excess of 9 feet, were not the highest of the year. Currents were 3.5 knots, and that's pretty stiff. We've learned from the State Department of Fish and Wildlife that those nets held 3 million pounds of fish that were ready to be harvested starting this Monday. And while there are no legal limits for how much weight the nets can hold, that's a lot of mass that could have been pushed on by those currents.
Perhaps the impact of these Atlantic salmon on wild populations, maybe it's more profound than we actually recognize.
Michael Kundu runs the environmental organization Seawolf and says the collapse of the fish farm and that eclipse claim didn't help the industry's credibility.
We need new sources of protein. And the truth is, if we're going to bring these industries into the state, we need to make sure that they're speaking fairly and they're speaking honestly.
Fish and Wildlife wants anglers to go to this webpage and report how many of the spotted silvery Atlantic salmon are caught to try and get some kind of total as to how many salmon might still be out there swimming around. The water-covered aquatic lands the farm sits on are leased from the state, and today the Department of Natural Resources told Cook they're in default on that lease because of the fish release. Also, attorneys for the organization Wild Fish Conservancy notified the company it intends to sue for violations of the Clean Water Act. As for Cook, which is a global player in the seafood business, a spokeswoman says, "We're going to do a thorough analysis of what happened." The company also says strong tides in July caused the pens to move, so Cook brought out a team of experts to secure the pens that still ended up like this a month later. In Seattle, Glenn Farley, King 5 News.